Story number 1. The Donner Party, Sierra Nevada. I still remember the night we decided to venture into the heart of the Sierra Nevada. It was a crisp October evening, the kind that hints at the impending harshness of winter. My 3 friends, Alex, Mia, and Emily, and I were driven by a mix of curiosity and the irresistible pull of adventure. The legends of the Donner Party, a group of immigrants trapped by unforgiving winter snows in 1846, had always fascinated us. Their desperate struggle for survival, the harrowing choices they faced, and the whispers of restless spirits lingering in the mountains called to us, promising stories that went beyond textbooks and dusty museum exhibits. As we approached the base of the mountains, the landscape transformed dramatically. The towering pines were heavy with snow, their branches bowing under the weight. The air grew thinner, colder, and every breath felt like inhaling shards of ice. The path ahead was treacherous, blanketed in a thick layer of fresh snow that masked the dangers lurking beneath. We set up our campsite near a clearing, the only signs of life the distant call of a lone eagle and the soft crunch of our footsteps. Before we settled in, an elderly local approached us. His face was withered, his eyes clouded with years of witnessing the mountain's moods. "You folks sure about this?" he asked, his voice gravelly. "This place ain't just snow and ice. Folks around here say they've heard the cries of the lost and seen shadows moving where they shouldn't. Be careful what you seek." I smiled politely, dismissing his warnings as the ramblings of someone who had spent too many winters in isolation. "Thanks for the advice," I replied, though a shiver ran down my spine. As night fell, we gathered around the campfire, the flames casting flickering shadows that danced with every gust of wind. The silence was almost peaceful, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the occasional rustle of the trees swayed by the night breeze. Around midnight, the atmosphere shifted. The wind began to howl, carrying with it an eerie melody that seemed almost human. Mia, always the most intuitive among us, was the first to notice. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, her eyes scanning the darkened woods. It started as a mere whistling, but soon it morphed into something more sinister, a distant, mournful wail that echoed through the night. "It sounds like crying," she continued, her voice trembling. Alex, ever the skeptic, tried to brush it off. "It's probably just the wind," he said, though I could see the unease in his eyes. Emily, however, wasn't so sure. "I don't know, Alex. It feels different. Like it's carrying a lot of pain." The next morning, we woke to a world transformed by a fresh snowfall. Emily was the first to discover the strange footprints near our campsite, tiny, almost childlike prints that led away into the dense forest. "That's odd," she remarked, examining them closely. "None of us went out last night." When we checked the campfire, it was inexplicably extinguished, the ashes cold despite the steady breeze. Alex suggested it was probably a gust of wind we hadn't accounted for, but Mia wasn't convinced. "Something's not right here," she insisted, her unease growing with each passing hour. Determined to uncover more about the Donner Party's plight, we decided to explore deeper into the forest the following day. The trees grew denser, their branches intertwining overhead like skeletal fingers reaching out to trap us. The path became increasingly treacherous, every step a battle against the thick snow that threatened to swallow us whole. Hours of trekking left us exhausted, both physically and mentally, but the allure of uncovering forgotten history kept us moving forward. As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, we stumbled upon an old, dilapidated cabin. Its wooden planks were warped and broken, the roof partially collapsed under the weight of snow. The windows were shattered, revealing the decayed interior. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she stepped closer, the eerie silence enveloping us like a shroud. Inside, the remnants of a fire lay cold, and rusty utensils were scattered haphazardly across the floor. The air was thick with the scent of decay and abandonment. Ryan, our group's resident curious one, picked up a corroded knife, admiring its craftsmanship despite the years of neglect. "Look at this," he said, holding it up to the dim light. "Still sharp, I bet." Mia felt a pang of unease. "Ryan, put it back," she whispered urgently, her eyes darting around the room as if sensing unseen dangers. I watched as tension mounted within our group, the oppressive atmosphere amplifying our unspoken fears. As night fell, the temperature dropped further, our breaths becoming visible in the frigid air. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw figures moving just beyond the tree line, ghostly apparitions with hollow eyes and gaunt frames. One figure stood still, staring directly at us before dissolving into the darkness, leaving an unsettling chill in its wake. That night, the sounds intensified. The wails grew louder, interspersed with soft whispers that seemed to call our names. It was as if the forest itself was alive with the tormented souls of the past, their anguish seeping into our very beings. Then, without warning, our campfire erupted violently. Flames leaped higher than ever before, casting an unnatural glow over the entire forest. Through the flickering light, I saw dozens of spectral figures encircling us, members of the Donner Party, their faces etched with sorrow and rage, their eyes hollow voids of despair. One of them, a particularly emaciated figure with sunken cheeks and bloodshot eyes, approached Ryan. His voice was a hollow echo. "You don't belong here," he snarled, reaching out with a skeletal hand that seemed to stretch infinitely towards Ryan. Suddenly, Ryan staggered, falling into the snow, feeling an icy grip clutch his leg. Panic surged through me as Alex tried to pull him free, but it felt like invisible forces were holding us down, binding us to the ground. Emily screamed, her voice lost in the cacophony of tortured cries surrounding us. A faint whisper reached my ear, "Hungry. Save us." The oppressive atmosphere made every movement feel like wading through molasses, our limbs heavy and unresponsive. Desperation took hold as we realized the apparitions were not just lingering spirits, but vengeful entities tied to their tragic fate. With adrenaline fueling our escape, we fled into the stormy night, abandoning our campsite and most of our gear. The forest seemed endless, each tree identical to the last, their branches clawing at us as we ran. The snow whipped against our faces, stinging our eyes and numbing our limbs, but the pain was secondary to the fear propelling us forward. The sounds of pursuit never ceased, ghostly footsteps echoing behind us, anguished screams piercing the night, and the relentless whispers urging us onward. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig heightened our terror, making it impossible to rest or find our bearings. We stumbled over roots and slipped on ice, our progress hampered by exhaustion and sheer panic. By dawn, exhaustion overcame us. The first rays of sunlight began to penetrate the canopy, casting long shadows that gradually dispersed the night's terrors. We found ourselves on a familiar trail, leading back to the edge of the forest. Glancing back, the apparitions had vanished, replaced by an eerie stillness that seemed almost artificial. But as we caught our breath and tried to steady our nerves, a series of fresh footprints traced our path, disappearing deep into the woods, a silent testament to the night's horrors. Back home, the horrors we endured didn't fade. Mia and Emily were plagued by nightmares, reliving the torment of the Donner Party's final days. They saw themselves among the spectral figures, feeling the same hunger and despair that had driven their ancestors to madness. The lines between reality and nightmare blurred, leaving them haunted by the past in ways that sleep could not cure. Alex, usually the rock of our group, became distant, his eyes often staring blankly into the distance as if searching for something unseen. One evening, as I unpacked our gear, I noticed Ryan's knife lying on the table. We were certain we had left it in the cabin, but there it was, rusted and cold, a tangible reminder of that night. When I asked about it, Ryan could only offer a haunted look, his usual composure shattered by the trauma we had all endured. Weeks later, news arrived of another group of campers experiencing similar phenomena, cries in the night, ghostly sightings, and inexplicable occurrences. It was as if the curse of the Donner Party was far from over, claiming new victims each year, forever tethered to the unforgiving wilderness they once tried to escape. The days turned into weeks, and the nightmares persisted. Mia and Emily spoke of shadowy figures watching them from the corners of their rooms, whispers echoing through their dreams. I found myself unable to shake the image of Ryan's haunted eyes and the cold grip that had tormented him. The knife remained on my table, a silent witness to the horrors we had faced. Driven by a need to understand and perhaps find a way to break the curse, I decided to return to the Sierra Nevada. The thought of confronting those restless spirits both terrified and compelled me. I knew it was risky, but the peace of mind for my friends and myself depended on it. When I arrived back at the base of the mountains, the air was even colder than before, the snow deeper and more unforgiving. The forest seemed to watch me, every shadow a potential threat. I followed the trail we had taken, each step bringing back memories of that terrifying night. As I ventured deeper, the silence was deafening, broken only by the crunch of my boots on the snow and the distant call of a lone owl. Finally, I reached the old cabin. It stood as a stark reminder of our ordeal, the same dilapidated structure we had discovered weeks earlier. Determined, I entered, the door creaking ominously as I pushed it open. Inside, the remnants were unchanged, cold ashes, rusty utensils, and now an open journal on the floor. I picked it up, the brittle pages whispering secrets of desperation and survival. As I read through the harrowing accounts of the Donner Party, I felt a presence in the room. Shadows seemed to lengthen and twist, and the temperature plummeted further. The whispers began again, softer this time, like voices just beyond hearing. I looked up to see a figure standing at the edge of the room, hollow eyes, gaunt form, and an aura of sorrow. "You don't belong here," the apparition intoned, its voice echoing in the confined space. "Help us." I felt a surge of empathy, understanding the eternal torment these souls endured. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Remember us. Share our story. Let us rest," the ghost replied, its form wavering like mist in the wind. Determined to honor their plea, I spent hours documenting their stories, the journal serving as a bridge between the past and the present. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through the broken windows, the presence in the room seemed to soften. The shadows receded, and the oppressive cold lifted, replaced by a sense of peace. Leaving the cabin, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The curse of the Donner Party seemed to have been acknowledged, their stories finally heard. As I made my way back through the forest, the path felt less menacing, the whispers now a gentle breeze rather than a cacophony of cries. Back home, the nightmares gradually faded, replaced by a sense of closure. Mia and Emily found solace in sharing our experiences, their nightmares giving way to dreams of peaceful snowy landscapes rather than tormenting apparitions. Alex, too, regained his composure, his distant gaze now focused on healing rather than fear. Weeks turned into months, and the knife remained a reminder of our journey. But instead of fear, it symbolized the bond we shared and the peace we had helped bring to restless souls. The Sierra Nevada continued to stand tall and silent, its secrets now partly unveiled. One evening, as I reflected on our adventure, I received another call from a fellow adventurer. They had heard about our experience and wanted to explore the Sierra Nevada, hoping to uncover more about the Donner Party. I hesitated, memories of that night still vivid, but knew that sharing their stories was the right thing to do. As I looked out my window, the snow-covered mountains bathed in moonlight, I felt a sense of fulfillment. The spirits of the Donner Party had found their peace, and perhaps, so had we. The Sierra Nevada remained a place of mystery and history, but now, it was also a place of understanding and respect. But as I turned away, a chilling thought crossed my mind. Were there still secrets buried deep within those snowy peaks, waiting for someone to uncover them? The forest stood silent, but its whispers lingered, a reminder that some histories are best remembered with reverence and compassion, ensuring that the past remains honored and never forgotten. Story number 2. Whaley House, San Diego. I've always been fascinated by the stories that linger in the shadows of historic landmarks, those whispered tales that blend fact and folklore into something both intriguing and terrifying. As a historian and author, I sought inspiration from places steeped in mystery and legend. Whaley House in San Diego, with its rich history and reputation as one of America's most haunted homes, seemed like the perfect setting for my next book. Little did I know, the house had secrets that would haunt me far beyond the pages of my manuscript. Whaley House stands proudly in the heart of San Diego, a grand structure from the 19th century that draws countless tourists each year. By day, it exudes an old-world charm with its ornate wooden facade and meticulously maintained gardens. Visitors stroll through its halls, marveling at the architecture and absorbing the history that permeates every corner. But as night falls, an eerie transformation takes place. The once inviting home becomes a place of darkness and dread, especially during the colder months when the nights grow long and unforgiving. The house was built on the site of a former courthouse where many criminals met their end by hanging. The lingering spirits of those wrongfully executed, especially a notorious figure known as Yankee Jim, are said to roam the premises, their restless souls unable to find peace. The Whaley family, who once inhabited the house, faced their own share of tragedies, adding layers to the house's haunted reputation. These tales of suffering and unfinished business have cemented Whaley House as a hotspot for paranormal activity. My name is Claire, and I've dedicated my career to uncovering the truths behind haunted locations. Armed with notebooks, cameras, and an unyielding curiosity, I decided to spend a week alone in Whaley House to document its history and the supernatural occurrences that so many claim to witness. My goal was to gather material for my book, but as the days passed, I realized I was embarking on a journey that would challenge my understanding of reality and fear. The first night was deceptively calm. I set up my temporary study in what was once the drawing room, a space adorned with antique furniture and faded portraits. The ambience was perfect for writing, with the soft glow of candlelight casting long shadows across the room. As midnight approached, a chill descended upon the house, and I felt an uneasy stillness settle in. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and causing the house to groan under its weight. Around midnight, I began to hear the faint sound of footsteps echoing up the grand staircase. My heart raced as I strained to listen, but the noise ceased as abruptly as it had started. Rationalizing it as the house settling or the wind playing tricks on me, I tried to focus on my writing. However, the feeling of being watched lingered, making it difficult to concentrate. The next morning, I decided to explore the lower levels of the house, where the old courthouse once stood. The basement was a labyrinth of narrow passages and forgotten rooms, each one holding whispers of the past. As I delved deeper, I discovered remnants of the courthouse, a rusted gallows, remnants of old cells, and faded graffiti left by those who once walked these halls. The air grew colder as I approached the spot where Yankee Jim had been hanged, the weight of history pressing down on me. That night, the strange occurrences intensified. I was jolted awake by the sound of a woman's laughter echoing through the halls. Heart-pounding, I grabbed my flashlight and cautiously made my way through the darkened corridors. The laughter seemed to come from the second floor, specifically from the upstairs hallway that led to the rooms where the Whaley family once lived. As I approached the hallway, I saw the faint outline of a man standing at the top of the stairs. His attire was unmistakably from the 19th century, a stark contrast to the modern surroundings. He stared at me with hollow eyes before vanishing into thin air, leaving me in a state of shock. The oppressive atmosphere made it clear that I wasn't alone in the house. Determined to document every encounter, I set up my equipment in the drawing room, hoping to capture evidence of the supernatural. Hours passed without incident, but as the clock struck 2, the temperature plummeted, and the room felt suffocatingly cold. Suddenly, the old portrait on the wall began to distort, the painted eyes following my every move. I watched in horror as the figure in the portrait seemed to shift, its expression contorting into one of rage and despair. Late that night, I heard the unmistakable sound of heavy breathing and the creak of wooden floorboards above me. Gathering my courage, I ascended the staircase, my flashlight barely cutting through the darkness. At the top, I found a room that had once served as the Whaley family's study. The air was thick with an invisible presence, and I could feel eyes boring into me from every shadow. As I stood there, a figure materialized before me, a woman in a flowing Victorian gown, her face pale and eyes vacant. She reached out a translucent hand, her fingers trembling as if trying to grasp something intangible. "Help us," she whispered, her voice echoing in the empty room. Before I could respond, she dissolved into mist, leaving me alone with my pounding heart and racing thoughts. The following days brought a relentless barrage of paranormal activity. Objects moved of their own accord, books flew off shelves, doors slammed shut, and the once quiet house became a cacophony of ghostly noises. The most disturbing incident occurred when I discovered an old photograph on the mantelpiece depicting Yankee Jim standing near the courthouse. The moment I touched the photo, I felt a surge of energy, and the spirits of the house seemed to converge around me, their presence overwhelming and suffocating. Desperate for answers, I delved into the history of Whaley House, uncovering stories of betrayal, wrongful executions, and unspoken tragedies. The more I learned, the more I understood the tormented souls that inhabited the house. Yankee Jim, in particular, had been wrongfully accused and executed, his spirit forever seeking justice and peace. The Whaley family had also faced untimely deaths, their spirits bound to the house by sorrow and regret. One stormy night, the hauntings reached their peak. The house seemed alive with the anguish of its past inhabitants. I was awakened by the sound of a woman crying out for help, her voice filled with desperation. Following the sound, I found myself in the basement, where the remnants of the courthouse still stood. The air was thick with malevolence, and I could feel the weight of countless tortured souls pressing down on me. Suddenly, the ground beneath me began to shake, and spectral figures emerged from the shadows. Yankee Jim and other condemned souls surrounded me, their expressions twisted in pain and anger. "You don't belong here," Yankee Jim bellowed, his voice echoing through the basement. I tried to back away, but an invisible force held me in place, the oppressive atmosphere making it impossible to move. In a last-ditch effort to escape, I sprinted towards the exit, the spirits chasing me relentlessly. The house seemed to warp around me, corridors stretching and twisting, trapping me in an endless maze of horror. Just as I felt I could run no further, I burst through the front door into the stormy night, the house looming behind me like a dark sentinel. Breathing heavily, I made my way back to my car, the sounds of the house fading but the sense of being watched never leaving me. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the silhouette of a woman standing by the window, her eyes following me until I was out of sight. Back home, the horrors I endured did not fade. Nightmares plagued my sleep, replaying the terrifying moments in Whaley House with vivid clarity. Mia and Emily, my closest friends, began experiencing their own encounters. They spoke of seeing shadowy figures in their homes and hearing whispers in the dead of night, their fear mirrored by mine. Determined to find closure, I revisited Whaley House with renewed purpose. Armed with new knowledge and a deeper understanding of the spirit's torment, I sought to help them find peace. I spent days documenting their stories, speaking to locals, and performing rituals meant to honor and release the restless souls. The process was draining, but I felt a sense of duty to the tormented spirits that had disrupted my life. One evening, as I stood in the study room, I felt a presence beside me. The woman in the Victorian gown appeared once more, her expression softer this time. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. As I watched, her form began to fade, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as if a great weight had been removed. Leaving the house, I felt a profound sense of relief. The nightmares began to subside, replaced by a newfound peace. Whaley House, though still a place of mystery, no longer held the same terror for me. I had helped the spirits find their peace, allowing me to move forward without the constant fear that had once consumed me. Months later, my book on Whaley House was published, detailing not only the history of the house but also my personal encounters with the supernatural. It became a bestseller, resonating with readers who were both fascinated and frightened by the true story behind one of America's most haunted homes. Yet, despite the closure I found, a lingering question remained: were there still secrets buried within Whaley House, waiting to be uncovered by the next curious soul? The open-ended nature of my experience suggested that the house's mysteries were far from fully revealed, leaving room for future tales of horror and discovery. As I look back on my time at Whaley House, I realized that some places hold onto their past so tightly that they never let go. The spirits of Yankee Jim and the Whaley family remain a testament to the enduring power of history and the unresolved pain that can transcend time. Whaley House stands as a silent guardian of these stories, a reminder that. Story number 3. Forest Haven, Maryland. I've always been drawn to places abandoned by time, locations where history and mystery intertwine to create an atmosphere ripe for storytelling. When I heard about Forest Haven in Maryland, a former mental health facility shut down in 1991 after a series of tragic abuses and deaths, I knew I had to explore it for my next project. My friends Mike, Emily, and Jason, equally intrigued by the macabre, eagerly agreed to join me. Little did we know, our fascination would soon turn into a nightmare we couldn't escape. Forest Haven stood silent and imposing against the winter landscape, its dilapidated buildings blanketed in a thick layer of snow. The once grand structures were now mere shells of their former selves, roofs partially caved in and windows shattered, allowing the biting cold to seep inside. The entire area was eerily quiet, the only sounds being the crunch of our footsteps on the snow and the distant call of an owl. By day, Forest Haven exuded an unsettling charm, attracting urban explorers and thrill-seekers. But as night fell, the true horror of the place began to reveal itself. Our journey began on a chilly December afternoon. Equipped with cameras, flashlights, and a healthy dose of skepticism, we approached the entrance of Forest Haven. The iron gates, rusted and overgrown with ivy, creaked ominously as we pushed them open. The air was thick with the scent of decay and abandonment, a stark reminder of the lives that once thrived within these walls. Ignoring the warnings from locals about the hauntings and unexplained phenomena, we stepped inside, eager to document our exploration. The first night was deceptively calm. We set up our base in what used to be the main lounge, a grand room with high ceilings and ornate wooden furnishings now covered in dust and cobwebs. The fireplace, long cold, was surrounded by cracked mirrors and faded paintings that seemed to watch our every move. As darkness enveloped the house, an oppressive silence settled in, broken only by the occasional drip of melting snow from the broken roof. Around midnight, the atmosphere began to change. The temperature dropped sharply, and a heavy stillness filled the air. I was reviewing some photos when I heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping coming from the staircase. Startled, I looked up to see Mike and Jason peering nervously at the staircase. "It's probably just the wind," Mike suggested, though his voice betrayed his uncertainty. But it wasn't the wind. The tapping grew louder, more deliberate, as if someone, or something, was moving up the stairs. We exchanged uneasy glances, the reality that we might not be alone sinking in. Emily, always the bravest, suggested we investigate, but Jason hesitated. "Maybe we should just stay put," he urged, his eyes darting towards the shadows that seemed to dance along the walls. Reluctantly, we decided to remain in the lounge, but the feeling of being watched persisted. Every creak of the floorboards and every whisper of the wind outside amplified our anxiety. The first night passed without further incident, but the seed of fear had been planted. The next morning, we decided to delve deeper into the history of Forest Haven. Emily spent hours poring over old records and newspaper clippings we found in the lounge. The facility had been notorious for its harsh treatments and the mysterious deaths of several patients. One name stood out, Yankee Jim, a patient who was wrongfully accused and executed by hanging on the very grounds where Forest Haven now stood. His restless spirit was said to haunt the premises, seeking justice and peace that was never granted. That night, the strange occurrences intensified. As we moved through the darkened corridors, the oppressive atmosphere made it difficult to breathe. We heard faint cries and moans echoing through the halls, voices that seemed to come from all directions. One evening, while Emily was setting up a camera in an abandoned patient room, she noticed something odd. "Guys, look at this," she called out, pointing to the window. A shadowy figure stood outside, watching us intently before vanishing into the night. When we approached, the room was empty, the only evidence of the apparition being the cold spot lingering in the air. Jason began to report feeling eyes on him wherever he went, especially near the old stairwell. "It's like someone's constantly watching me," he confided, his voice shaky. Mike and Emily tried to reassure him, but the unease was palpable among us. The coldness in the house seemed to grow, every corner hiding unseen threats and every room holding the ghosts of the past. One night, as we sat around the remnants of our campfire in the main lounge, a loud crash echoed through the house. We jumped to our feet, hearts pounding, as the sound of something, or someone, toppling objects reverberated around us. Jason's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced on the walls. "We need to get out of here," Mike whispered urgently, his face pale with fear. But escaping Forest Haven was easier said than done. The house seemed to morph around us, corridors stretching and twisting, leading us deeper into its labyrinthine structure. As we navigated through the endless hallways, the voices grew louder, a cacophony of tortured souls screaming for release. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed shut, and the oppressive weight of the house made every breath a struggle. In a desperate attempt to find an exit, we stumbled upon the old courthouse in the basement, a stark reminder of the dark history that haunted this place. The room was cold, the air thick with the scent of decay. The gallows stood ominously in the center, the wooden beams splintered and worn. As we approached, a spectral figure materialized before us, Yankee Jim, his form gaunt and eyes hollow. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed, his voice filled with rage and sorrow. Panicked, we tried to back away, but the door slammed shut, trapping us inside. The temperature plummeted further, our breaths visible in the icy air. The spirits of the wronged patients surrounded us, their presence suffocating and malevolent. "Leave this place," Yankee Jim repeated, his form flickering with anger. "Or suffer the same fate." Terrified, we searched for another way out, but the house seemed determined to keep us trapped. Mike, struggling to stay calm, tried to find a way to communicate with the spirits, hoping to appease them. "We mean no harm," he pleaded, his voice trembling. "We just want to leave." But the spirits were relentless. The floor beneath us began to shake, and the room filled with a deafening roar. We were surrounded, the apparitions closing in, their eyes burning with anguish and hatred. "Help us," Emily cried out, her voice breaking under the pressure. "Set us free." In a last-ditch effort to escape, we sprinted towards the entrance, the spirits hot on our heels. The house seemed to come alive, corridors shifting and expanding, preventing our escape. Jason, his legs numb from the cold, stumbled and fell, his flashlight skidding across the floor. As we dragged him up, the spirits closed in, their whispers turning into screams that echoed through the house. Just when all hope seemed lost, the first light of dawn pierced through the windows, bathing the house in a golden glow. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the spirits began to fade, their cries silenced by the approaching day. Exhausted and battered, we found ourselves outside, the gates of Forest Haven standing as silent sentinels against the rising sun. Breathing heavily, we looked back at the house, its windows still shattered and snow-covered, but no longer alive with malevolent energy. We had escaped, but the experience left deep scars on our minds. As we drove away, the image of Yankee Jim and the other tortured souls haunted our thoughts, a reminder of the darkness that lingered within Forest Haven. Back home, the nightmares began almost immediately. Jason and Mike found themselves reliving the horrors of Forest Haven in their dreams, the screams and whispers echoing in their minds long after waking. Emily reported seeing shadowy figures moving in the corners of her vision, and the once vibrant Sarah felt an unshakable presence following her every step. Determined to put the memories behind us, we tried to move on, but the hauntings only grew more persistent. Objects in our homes would move without explanation, and the cold spots from Forest Haven seemed to follow us, no matter where we went. The photographs we had taken during our exploration revealed something chilling, ghostly apparitions standing in the background, watching us from the shadows. One evening, as I reviewed our footage, I noticed something I had missed before. In several of the photos, the faint image of Yankee Jim stood behind us, his eyes empty and filled with rage. The realization hit me hard. Forest Haven had followed us, the spirits unable to let go of their pain and suffering. Desperate for answers, I reached out to a local paranormal investigator, hoping to find a way to cleanse our lives of the lingering spirits. Together, we revisited Forest Haven, determined to break the cycle of torment. The night we returned was colder and darker than ever, the house standing silent yet ominously inviting us back into its depths. Armed with new equipment and protective charms, we entered the house once more. The spirits were restless, their presence more intense than before. We conducted rituals and recited prayers, trying to offer peace to the tortured souls trapped within Forest Haven. As we worked, the apparitions appeared, their anger giving way to sorrow. Yankee Jim approached us, his form less menacing but still filled with anguish. "You can't leave us," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "We need justice." Understanding dawned on me. To truly set the spirits free, we needed to acknowledge their suffering and ensure their stories were told. I began documenting their experiences, speaking to local historians and descendants of the Donner Party to piece together the truth behind their tragic end. As we shared their stories with the world, the hauntings began to subside. The spirits found solace in being remembered and their wrongs acknowledged. Forest Haven, once a place of fear and despair, became a site of remembrance and respect for the lives lost and the injustices suffered. Months passed, and the nightmares gradually faded, replaced by a sense of closure and peace. Jason and Mike found solace in sharing their experiences, helping them heal from the trauma. Emily, too, regained her confidence, her fear diminishing as she embraced the truth behind the hauntings. But the memory of Forest Haven lingered, a testament to the enduring power of history and the spirits that refuse to be forgotten. As I sit here, reflecting on our ordeal, I realize that some places hold onto their past so tightly that they never let go. Forest Haven remains a silent guardian of these stories, a reminder that history must be remembered with reverence and compassion. Yet, a lingering question remains: are there still secrets buried deep within those snow-covered grounds, waiting for the next curious soul to uncover them? The open-ended nature of our experience suggests that the mysteries of Forest Haven are far from fully revealed, leaving room for future tales of horror and discovery. The snow continues to fall gently on Forest Haven, each flake a silent witness to the ghosts that roam its halls, forever searching for peace and justice. Story number 4. Ghost on the Mountain Road, Appalachian, New Hampshire. I've always been drawn to the eerie beauty of abandoned places, the silent stories they whisper to those willing to listen. My name is Daniel, a nature photographer with a penchant for the macabre. When I stumbled upon the legend of the Ghost on the Mountain Road in the Appalachian Mountains of New Hampshire, I knew I had to see it for myself. Despite the locals' warnings and the chilling tales that surrounded Forest Haven, my curiosity and desire for unique photographs pushed me to embark on this winter expedition with my 3 friends, Mike, Emily, and Jason. Forest Haven was a relic of a bygone era, an old mental health facility shut down in 1991 after a series of horrific abuses and unexplained deaths. By winter, the once bustling grounds were reduced to a haunting tableau of decaying buildings, collapsed roofs, and shattered windows, all blanketed in a thick layer of snow. The isolation and silence of the area amplified the ominous presence that seemed to permeate every corner of the abandoned camp. We arrived on a frigid December morning, the snow crunching under our boots as we made our way through the overgrown paths. The air was biting cold, each breath forming a visible mist that quickly dissipated into the stark white landscape. The towering trees stood bare, their skeletal branches reaching out like desperate hands into the gray sky. The stillness was almost oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of the wind through the trees or the distant call of a lone bird. Our mission was simple: document the desolation of Forest Haven and uncover the truth behind the ghostly legends that plagued the area. Equipped with cameras, flashlights, and a healthy dose of skepticism, we set up our base in what remained of the main lodge, a grand, albeit crumbling, structure that once housed patients and staff alike. The fireplace, though cold and devoid of flames, served as a makeshift meeting point where we could plan our exploration. The first night was deceptively calm. We huddled around the remnants of a campfire, sharing stories and theories about the hauntings. Mike, always the skeptic, dismissed the tales as mere folklore, while Emily, with her sensitive nature, expressed unease about the restless spirits that were said to roam the grounds. Jason, ever the adventurer, was eager to delve deeper into the mysteries of Forest Haven. As midnight approached, a heavy silence settled over the camp. The temperature dropped sharply, and a dense fog began to roll in, obscuring our vision. It was then that I heard it, a soft, melancholic singing emanating from deep within the forest. The haunting melody was unmistakably that of a woman, her voice carrying a sorrow that pierced through the stillness of the night. I glanced at my friends, their faces pale in the dim light. Did you guys hear that? I whispered, my voice barely audible over the wind. Mike shook his head, though I could see the tension in his posture. Probably just the wind, he replied, though his eyes betrayed his uncertainty. But Emily was not so easily dismissed. No, it's a woman's voice, she insisted, her eyes wide with fear. It's so sad. Before we could decide what to do next, the singing faded into the night, leaving behind an unsettling silence. I tried to rationalize it as the wind playing tricks on our ears, but the eerie feeling lingered, making it difficult to relax even in the supposed safety of our temporary shelter. The next morning, we set out to explore the grounds, hoping to capture some intriguing shots of the decaying structures. As we trekked through the snow-covered paths, Emily stumbled upon something unexpected, tiny, delicate footprints leading away from our campsite and disappearing into the dense forest. Look at this, she called out, her breath visible in the cold air. These footprints, they weren't mine, Mike's, or anyone else's. Mike examined the prints closely. They're too small for any of us, he mused. But no one left the camp last night. Perplexed, we decided to follow the trail, our flashlights cutting through the fog like beacons of hope in the oppressive darkness. The footprints led us to an old, abandoned cabin on the outskirts of the property. The structure was in worse shape than the main lodge, its walls crumbling and windows shattered, allowing the harsh winter wind to howl through the gaps. Inside, the cabin was a frozen snapshot of the past. Dust-covered furniture lay scattered, and remnants of old medical equipment hinted at the facility's dark history. As I snapped photographs, Jason noticed something glinting in the corner. He approached cautiously, revealing an old, tarnished locket partially buried under the debris. I think this belonged to someone, Jason said, picking it up. It's beautiful, but why was it left here? Before any of us could respond, the temperature in the cabin plummeted further, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. A soft whisper echoed through the room, barely audible but unmistakably clear, "Help me." We exchanged uneasy glances, the reality of our situation sinking in. Forest Haven wasn't just a place of historical tragedy, it was a site where the unresolved pain of the past still lingered, reaching out to the present. That night, the haunting became more intense. The singing returned, louder and more desperate, echoing through the halls of the main lodge. Emily decided to investigate, her curiosity getting the better of her fear. Armed with her camera, she ventured towards the source of the sound, leaving the rest of us huddled in the drawing room. Minutes turned into what felt like hours as we waited, the oppressive silence only broken by the distant wails of the wind. Finally, Emily returned, her face pale and eyes wide with terror. "I saw her," she gasped. "A woman in a white dress, standing at the end of the hallway. She was crying, and then she just vanished." Mike tried to comfort her, but the atmosphere had grown thick with tension. "We need to stick together," he urged, though his voice lacked conviction. "There's something wrong here." Determined to get to the bottom of the haunting, we decided to delve deeper into the history of Forest Haven. Emily spent hours poring over old records we found in the main lodge, uncovering the dark truths that had been buried with time. The facility had been notorious for its inhumane treatments and the mysterious deaths of several patients, including a woman named Eleanor Whitaker. According to the records, Eleanor had been admitted to Forest Haven in the late 1800s after being accused of witchcraft, a charge that led to her brutal treatment and eventual death during a harsh winter storm. Her restless spirit was said to wander the mountain roads, searching for a way back home, her sorrowful songs a lament for the life she had lost. As we pieced together the fragments of Eleanor's story, the hauntings intensified. Objects began to move on their own, books flew off shelves, and doors slammed shut without warning. One evening, as I was reviewing the day's photographs, I noticed something chilling, an apparition of a woman in white standing behind me in one of the shots. When I turned around, no one was there. Panic set in as the supernatural events escalated. The once quiet forest was now alive with the cries and whispers of the tormented souls of Forest Haven. We realized that we were not just visitors but intruders in a place where the past refused to stay buried. One particularly stormy night, the haunting reached its peak. The wind howled like a living entity, and the snowstorm outside mirrored the chaos within the house. We gathered in the main lounge, the air thick with tension and fear. Suddenly, the entire house seemed to come alive. The walls groaned, the floorboards creaked, and the oppressive cold intensified, making it difficult to breathe. Out of nowhere, the sound of Eleanor's voice pierced through the noise. "Help me," she cried, her voice filled with despair. The apparition of Eleanor appeared before us, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. "I can't find my way." Desperate to help, we attempted to communicate with her, offering words of comfort and promising to uncover her story. But the spirits of Forest Haven were not ready to let go. The air grew colder, and the shadows deepened, the presence of the restless souls pressing down on us like a suffocating blanket. As we struggled to find a way to appease the spirits, the house seemed to twist and contort around us. Corridors stretched impossibly long, doors led to nowhere, and the snowstorm outside intensified, trapping us within the haunted walls of Forest Haven. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, leaving us trapped in a loop of terror and despair. In a final act of desperation, we decided to perform a ritual we had read about, a way to honor the spirits and help them find peace. Armed with candles, offerings, and heartfelt prayers, we gathered in the heart of the house, hoping to break the cycle of torment that had ensnared Forest Haven. As we began the ritual, the atmosphere shifted. The oppressive cold lifted slightly, and the haunting cries softened into mournful whispers. Eleanor's apparition appeared once more, her form flickering with uncertainty. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice tinged with hope. The other spirits began to fade, their presence diminishing as peace settled over the house. Exhausted but relieved, we watched as the last of the apparitions disappeared, leaving behind a sense of calm that had been absent for so long. The storm outside subsided, the snow ceasing to fall as dawn broke over the Appalachian Mountains. Forest Haven stood silent and still, no longer a place of fear but a site of remembrance and closure. As we left the haunted grounds, the weight of our experiences lingered. The photographs we took were no longer just images of decay but snapshots of a poignant history that demanded to be remembered. Forest Haven had shared its story with us, and in doing so, we had helped its restless spirits find the peace they so desperately sought. Back home, the memories of Forest Haven remained vivid, the nightmares fading but never fully disappearing. Mike and Jason continued to grapple with the lingering sense of being watched, while Emily found solace in sharing our story, ensuring that Eleanor's tale would not be forgotten. As for me, the journey had changed me, deepening my understanding of the thin veil between the living and the dead. Months later, I received a letter from a local historian who had heard about our experiences. She expressed her gratitude for uncovering Eleanor's story and invited me to collaborate on a comprehensive history of Forest Haven. It was a reminder that some places, no matter how haunted, deserve to have their stories told with compassion and respect. But as I look back on that winter expedition, a lingering question remains: are there still secrets buried deep within the Appalachian Mountains, waiting for the next curious soul to uncover them? The open-ended nature of our experience suggests that the mysteries of Forest Haven are far from fully revealed, leaving room for future tales of horror and discovery. The snow continues to blanket the mountains, each flake a silent witness to the spirits that roam the trails, forever searching for a way home. Story number 5. Ghost on the Mountain Road, Smuggler's Notch, Vermont. I've always been fascinated by the stories that linger in the shadows of forgotten places, where history and mystery intertwine to create an atmosphere ripe for storytelling. My name is Jake Thompson, a seasoned mountain guide and an avid skier, always on the lookout for the next thrilling adventure. When my friend Lily suggested we explore Smuggler's Notch in Vermont for her photography project, I was intrigued by the challenge. Smuggler's Notch, with its treacherous slopes and rich, albeit dark, history, promised both excitement and the perfect backdrop for her haunting images. Smuggler's Notch was notorious not just for its skiing but also for its sinister past. Nestled deep within the Appalachian Mountains, the area was once a bustling hub for bootleggers smuggling alcohol from Canada to the United States during the Prohibition era. The narrow, winding roads and hidden trails provided the perfect cover for illicit activities. However, the harsh winters were unforgiving, and many smugglers met their demise in brutal snowstorms. Their bodies never recovered. Locals often spoke of restless spirits haunting the mountain roads, particularly during the winter months when the storms were most severe. Lily, a talented photographer with a keen eye for the macabre, was eager to capture the essence of Smuggler's Notch. She believed that the spirits of the past still lingered, and her project aimed to uncover the truth behind the ghostly legends. Despite the warnings from the locals about the haunted history and the eerie phenomena reported by previous visitors, we set out one crisp December morning, determined to document the abandoned trails and uncover the stories etched into the snow-covered landscape. The journey to Smuggler's Notch was anything but easy. The roads were narrow, flanked by towering pines and jagged rocks, all cloaked in a thick blanket of snow. The air was frigid, each breath forming visible puffs that quickly dissipated into the biting cold. As we ascended higher, the scenery transformed into a desolate, white wilderness. The isolation was palpable, the silence only broken by the howling wind and the crunch of our boots on the snow. We set up our base in a small clearing, the remnants of old cabins and abandoned gear scattered around us. The main lodge, once a hub of activity, now stood as a ghostly sentinel, its windows shattered and doors hanging ajar. The atmosphere was thick with history and an unspoken tension that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Lily unpacked her camera gear, her eyes scanning the horizon for the perfect shot, while I began to scout the immediate area, ensuring our safety in the unforgiving terrain. That first night, the air was still, the only sounds the occasional creak of a distant tree and the whisper of the wind through the pines. We huddled around a small campfire, the flames providing a flickering source of light and warmth against the encroaching darkness. As the night deepened, an unsettling stillness settled over the area, broken only by the soft rustling of snowflakes falling gently to the ground. Around midnight, I heard it, a faint, melancholic singing echoing through the forest. At first, I thought it was the wind playing tricks on my ears, but the melody was too structured, too sorrowful to be mere nature. I glanced at Lily, who was intently focusing her camera on the flickering flames, seemingly oblivious to the haunting tune. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Lily looked up, her expression thoughtful. "Yeah, it sounds like someone singing. Maybe it's just an old song from the past. These mountains have a lot of history." But I wasn't convinced. The singing carried a weight of sorrow that tugged at my soul, a plea for help that seemed to resonate from the very heart of the mountains. I decided to investigate, motioning for Lily and our other friend, Jason, to stay close. As I followed the sound, the singing grew louder, guiding me deeper into the forest. The trees seemed to close in around me, their bare branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to hold me back. The path was treacherous, hidden beneath a thick layer of fresh snow, making every step a challenge. Suddenly, the singing stopped, leaving me in an eerie silence that pressed down on me like a physical force. I turned to find Lily and Jason standing just a few feet away, their faces pale with worry. "Nothing," Lily said softly. Maybe it was just our imagination. But as we made our way back to the campfire, the feeling of being watched lingered. The snowflakes continued to fall, each one landing softly on our shoulders, but the oppressive atmosphere made it difficult to relax. We decided to retire for the night, the promise of daylight giving us a glimmer of hope for a calmer second day. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds, casting a pale light over the desolate landscape. We decided to explore one of the lesser-known trails, hoping to capture some unique shots for Lily's project. The trail was narrow, winding through dense thickets of snow-covered trees, leading us towards a remote part of the mountain that few dared to venture. As we trekked deeper, we stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. Its wooden structure was withered and worn, the roof partially collapsed under the weight of the snow. The windows were shattered, and the door hung crookedly on its hinges, creaking softly with every gust of wind. Curiosity getting the better of us, we decided to take a closer look. Inside, the cabin was a frozen snapshot of the past. Dust-covered furniture lay scattered around, and remnants of old equipment hinted at the grim history that had unfolded within these walls. Lily began taking photos, capturing the haunting beauty of the decay, while Jason explored the corners of the room, his flashlight illuminating forgotten memories. It was then that I noticed something odd, a series of small footprints leading from the cabin door into the surrounding snow, but no sign of anyone following. Strange, I muttered, kneeling down to examine the tracks. These footprints are tiny, almost childlike. But no one was here with us. Lily joined me, her camera ready to document the anomaly. Maybe someone got lost and wandered off? These trails stop abruptly, though. Before we could ponder further, a loud thud echoed from the back of the cabin, followed by a low, mournful moan. We exchanged nervous glances, the hairs on the back of our necks standing up. "We should get out of here," Jason urged, his voice tense. But curiosity anchored us in place. We decided to press on, hoping to uncover more clues about the haunting presence that seemed to permeate Smuggler's Notch. As we ventured further, the atmosphere grew heavier, the cold more biting, and the silence more oppressive. It was as if the mountains themselves were watching us, guarding their secrets with an icy grip. That night, as we returned to our camp, the haunting melodies returned, more intense and sorrowful than before. The singing seemed to swirl around us, emanating from every direction, yet no source was visible. Lily, ever the brave one, suggested we set up additional cameras to capture the phenomenon, determined to provide evidence for her project. We positioned our equipment strategically, the cameras aimed at different angles of the surrounding forest. As we settled in for the night, the temperature plummeted, and the wind howled louder, shaking the remnants of our campfire. The eerie silence was shattered by the sudden sound of footsteps approaching our tents, followed by a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the cold night. "We need to leave," Jason exclaimed, his voice cracking with fear. "Now." But as we tried to gather our things, the snowstorm outside intensified, making visibility nearly impossible. The wind howled like a living entity, and the ground beneath us seemed to shift and tremble. We huddled together, trying to stay warm and find comfort in each other's presence, the sounds of the storm masking our terror. Suddenly, the main lodge came alive with spectral figures, ghostly apparitions clad in old-fashioned attire, their faces twisted in agony and despair. They moved through the halls, their ethereal forms flickering like candle flames in the wind. The air was thick with their mournful cries, a chorus of pain that pierced through the soul. One figure, a woman in a flowing white dress, approached us, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. "Help us," she whispered, her voice echoing in our minds. "Find our way home." We stood frozen, unable to move as the apparition reached out a translucent hand. "You must not stay," she continued, her voice growing louder with each word. "The mountain claims those who linger too long." Panic surged through us as the spectral figures closed in, their presence suffocating and malevolent. We realized that Smuggler's Notch was not just a place of natural beauty and historical intrigue, but a haunted realm where the restless spirits of the past still roamed, seeking peace and resolution. Desperate to escape, we fled towards the trail, the apparitions trailing behind us, their cries and whispers guiding us deeper into the storm. The snowstorm raged around us, the wind tearing at our clothes and the cold seeping into our bones. Every step was a struggle, the snow thick and unyielding, making progress slow and treacherous. As we navigated the narrow trail, the sounds of the spirits intensified, their presence a constant reminder that we were not alone. The snow whipped around us, blinding our vision and making it difficult to see the path ahead. We stumbled over hidden roots and slipped on icy patches, our breaths coming in sharp, visible gasps as we pushed ourselves to keep moving. Suddenly, the trail seemed to disappear, swallowed by the swirling snow. We were lost, trapped in a snowstorm with no clear direction. The apparitions surrounded us, their forms becoming more defined and their intentions clear. "Leave this place," Yankee Jim's ghostly figure growled, his voice filled with anger and sorrow. "Or suffer the same fate." Fear and desperation pushed us forward, our survival instincts kicking in as we fought against the storm and the spectral forces trying to hold us back. The night seemed endless, each moment stretching into eternity as we struggled to find our way out of the haunted wilderness. Just when all hope seemed lost, the first light of dawn began to pierce through the clouds, casting a pale glow over the snow-covered landscape. The snowstorm began to abate, the wind dying down as if acknowledging our struggle. We found ourselves on a familiar trail, the path leading back towards the edge of Smuggler's Notch. Exhausted and battered, we pushed ourselves towards the safety of our vehicle, the spectral apparitions fading into the distance as the sun rose higher. As we reached our car, we turned back to see the haunted trail disappear into the forest, the spirits no longer chasing us but watching from the shadows, their sorrowful eyes following us until we were out of sight. We sat in stunned silence, the weight of our ordeal pressing down on us, the memories of the night forever etched into our minds. Back home, the aftermath of our experience continued to haunt us. Lily began seeing ghostly figures in her photographs, their hollow eyes staring back at her from the snow-covered trails. Jake found himself reliving the screams and whispers in his dreams, the boundary between reality and nightmare blurring in terrifying ways. Mike and Jason were no better, each grappling with their own haunting memories of that cursed night and Smuggler's Notch. Determined to put the experience behind us, we tried to return to our normal lives, but the spirits of the past refused to let go. Objects in our homes moved without explanation, shadows danced in the corners of our eyes, and the coldness of Smuggler's Notch seemed to follow us wherever we went. The photographs Lily took served as a constant reminder, each image capturing a fragment of the ghostly presence that had tormented us. One evening, as I reviewed our footage, I noticed something chilling, an apparition of Yankee Jim standing behind us in one of the shots, his eyes empty and filled with rage. The realization hit me hard. Forest Haven had followed us, the restless spirits unable to let go of their pain and suffering. We were trapped in a cycle of fear and haunting, the legends of Smuggler's Notch becoming our personal nightmare. Desperate for answers and a way to break free from the lingering curse, we decided to return to Smuggler's Notch, this time with the help of a local paranormal investigator named Rachel. Armed with new equipment and protective charms, we ventured back into the heart of the haunted mountains, determined to uncover the truth and find a way to appease the restless spirits. As we approached the trail, the atmosphere was thick with tension, the air colder and the snow more unforgiving than before. Rachel guided us through the winding paths, her expertise providing a semblance of hope amidst the despair. We reached the old cabin where our journey had first taken a dark turn, the remnants of the past glaring back at us with malevolent intent. Rachel set up her equipment, her presence providing a sense of calm amidst the chaos. As night fell once more, the haunting melodies returned, louder and more desperate than ever. The apparitions materialized around us, their sorrowful cries filling the air with a palpable sense of anguish. "Help us," they implored, their voices echoing through the silent night. Determined to bring peace to the tormented spirits, we conducted a ritual of remembrance, honoring the lives lost and acknowledging the suffering that had bound them to the mountains. As we chanted and prayed, the apparitions began to fade, their forms dissolving into the snow until only the faintest whispers remained. With the first light of dawn, the oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a sense of tranquility that had eluded us for so long. We had finally helped the restless souls of Smuggler's Notch find the peace they so desperately sought, breaking the cycle of torment that had haunted us for months. As we left the mountains, the snow-covered trails seemed less menacing, the spirits of the past now at rest. But the memory of our ordeal lingered, a reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead, and the enduring power of history and sorrow. Smuggler's Notch stood silent and still, its secrets finally laid to rest, but the lessons we learned remained etched in our hearts forever. Yet, as the years passed, the legends of Smuggler's Notch continued to draw the curious and the brave, each new visitor carrying the hope of uncovering the truth and the risk of awakening the spirits that still whispered in the winds of the Appalachian Mountains. The open-ended nature of our experience suggested that the mysteries of Smuggler's Notch were far from fully revealed, leaving room for future tales of horror and discovery. The snow continued to blanket the mountain trails, each flake a silent witness to the spirits that roamed the roads, forever searching for their way home.